Have you ever stopped to wonder what the sound of a fading memory actually feels like, or why the most vibrant lives can suddenly be silenced in a matter of mere seconds? As I sit here in the quiet glow of my study, looking out at the soft twilight of a Maryland evening, I find myself thinking back on the 30,000 souls I have treated over the past quarter century. Each of those faces tells a story, some of triumph, but many of a quiet, devastating tragedy that we in the medical world call a stroke. I am Dr. Sanjay Gupta, and after 50 years of walking this earth and 25 years as a neurosurgeon, I have learned that the human brain is the most beautiful, fragile masterpiece ever created. Yet every 40 seconds in this country, that masterpiece is shattered. It is a staggering, heart-wrenching reality that according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, over 795,000 Americans suffer a stroke every single year. That is nearly 800,000 families whose worlds are turned upside down, often without a single moment of warning. I remember standing in the sterile, cold hallway of the intensive care unit, the rhythmic clicking of my shoes echoing against the linoleum, heading toward a room where a family's life was about to change forever. The air in those rooms always feels heavy, thick with the unsaid words and the sudden crushing weight of what if. You see, nearly 610,000 of those annual cases are first-time strokes. People who woke up, drank their coffee, kissed their spouses, and never imagined that by sunset they would be fighting for the very essence of who they are. What haunts me most as a physician is that 3 out of every 4 strokes happen in people over the age of 65. These are our teachers, our veterans, our grandparents, the very bedrock of our communities. For these older adults, a stroke isn't just a clinical diagnosis recorded on a chart. It is a violent theft of independence. It is the sudden, terrifying realization that the legs which walked miles now refuse to move, and the voice that sang lullabies is now trapped behind a wall of silence. I have held the hands of men who ran entire corporations but could no longer hold a spoon, and I have looked into the eyes of women who forgot the names of the children they raised with such devotion. It is a loss of identity that cuts deeper than any surgical scalpel ever could. Most people assume that as we age, this is simply an inevitable part of the twilight years, a dark lottery where your number eventually comes up. But as a researcher who has pored over data from Harvard Medical School and clinical trials from across the globe, I am here to tell you that this is a lie. The most profound revelation of my career is the fact that up to 80% of strokes are entirely preventable. 80%. That number represents hundreds of thousands of lives that could remain intact, hundreds of thousands of voices that could keep singing if only we understood how to manage the silent fires of high blood pressure, cholesterol, and chronic inflammation. Most of my patients come to me expecting a miracle pill or a high-tech surgical intervention, and while those have their place, the real miracle is often sitting right on your kitchen counter. We have become so accustomed to looking for health in a prescription bottle that we have forgotten the ancient healing power of the earth. I've seen the meat and potatoes culture of our heartland lead to clogged arteries and brittle vessels. But I've also seen the incredible resilience of the human body when it is finally given the right fuel. The journey I want to take you on today isn't about restrictive diets or joyless eating. It is about neuroprotection and vascular restoration. It is about understanding that your kitchen is, in fact, the most sophisticated pharmacy you will ever own. When I talk to my colleagues at world-renowned institutions, we don't just discuss surgery, we discuss the 6 everyday foods that have been proven in peer-reviewed, double-blind studies to nourish the brain and shield the blood vessels, especially as we cross the threshold of 60. These aren't exotic herbs found in a remote rainforest. They are the simple ingredients you walk past every week at your local grocery store. I want you to sit back, perhaps take a deep breath, and stay with me for a moment. I'm not just speaking to you as a doctor who has performed thousands of craniotomies, but as a son who wants his parents to stay sharp, and as a friend who wants you to enjoy every bit of the life you have worked so hard to build. Because the truth is, the choices we make at the dinner table tonight are the bricks and mortar of the health we will have 10 years from now. Prevention doesn't have to be a chore. It can be a celebration of life. It can mean more mornings watching the sunrise, more memories captured in photos, and more time to be exactly who you were meant to be. Let us begin this journey toward healing together, starting with a discovery that is as delightful as it is powerful. As a neurosurgeon who has spent decades navigating the intricate, labyrinthine pathways of the human brain, I have often found that the most profound truths are the ones we overlook because they seem too simple. Standing in the sterile hum of the surgical theater, I've often looked down at the delicate vessels of a patient and realized that the catastrophe unfolding before me didn't happen overnight. It was a slow accumulation of choices, a silent gathering of clouds. But here is the promise that keeps me going, a statistic that should be shouted from every rooftop in America. 80% of these life-altering events are entirely within our power to prevent. Imagine that. 8 out of 10 families who are currently mourning a loss or struggling through grueling physical therapy could have had a completely different story. This isn't just a hopeful theory, it is a clinical reality supported by decades of epidemiological research. We fight because we know that managing high blood pressure, cholesterol, and the invisible fire of inflammation can stop a stroke before it ever has a chance to strike. When I speak to my younger residents, I tell them that our job isn't just to repair the damage after the storm has hit, but to teach people how to reinforce their own levees. We are in a war against a silent thief that targets our elders, those over 65 who have so much wisdom left to share. I've seen the heartbreak in a husband's eyes when he realizes his wife of 50 years no longer recognizes his face because a clot blocked the flow of oxygen to her memories for just a few minutes too long. These stories are the fuel for my mission. We aren't just looking for health in a vague sense. We are looking for the preservation of the soul. Science, particularly studies coming out of places like Harvard and major European research centers, has shifted the paradigm. We now know that the vascular system is incredibly responsive to what we put into it. The lining of your arteries, the endothelium, is a living organ that can be healed or harmed by your next meal. I've spent years analyzing the data, and it always leads back to the same place, the kitchen. Most people are surprised when I tell them that the most effective medical interventions I can recommend don't come with a high price tag or a long list of side effects. They come from the produce aisle. We are talking about a fundamental shift in how we perceive aging. It is not an inevitable slide into decay. It can be a vibrant, active continuation of the life you love. I want you to understand the weight of that 80% promise. It means you are not a victim of your genetics or a bystander in your own health. You are the commander-in-chief of your biological destiny. Today, I am handing you the map to navigate away from the emergency room. We are going to explore how 6 everyday foods act as biological shields, nourishing the neurons and smoothing the pathways for the blood that keeps your thoughts alive. This is why we fight, for the mornings yet to come, for the words yet to be spoken, and for the independence that belongs to you. I remember the day Margaret Sullivan, or Maggie as her students called her, walked into my office in Savannah. The Georgia humidity was thick outside, but inside Maggie was shivering with a cold, quiet fear. At 74, she had spent her life teaching children how to read, but now she found herself struggling to find the right words at the dinner table. "Dr. Gupta," she whispered, her hands trembling as she clutched her floral-patterned purse. "I'm losing my mind, aren't I? I'm going to forget my grandchildren's faces." She had early signs of memory fog and a blood pressure reading that made my heart sink. She was terrified of the heavy medications her previous doctor had suggested, fearing they would turn her into a zombie. I looked at this brilliant woman and decided to give her a different kind of prescription. I told her, "Maggie, I want you to go to the store and buy the darkest chocolate you can find, at least 70% cocoa." The look of confusion on her face was priceless, but I sat her down and explained the hard science. We discussed a landmark Swedish study that followed over 37,000 older adults for more than 10 years, finding that those who consumed dark chocolate regularly had a 17% lower risk of stroke. It wasn't because of the sugar, it was because of the flavonoids. These natural plant compounds are like a spa treatment for your blood vessels. They trigger the production of nitric oxide, a gas that tells your arteries to relax, widen, and let the life-giving blood flow freely to the brain. I told her about the Harvard Medical School trials where seniors with poor circulation saw measurable improvements in memory and blood flow within just 2 weeks of consuming flavonoid-rich cocoa. I saw the first spark of hope in her eyes that afternoon. Maggie started a ritual. Every day after her lunch, she would sit on her porch, listen to the cicadas, and slowly savor 2 small squares of 70% dark chocolate. She treated it like a sacred ceremony. Over the next few months, her blood pressure began to stabilize, not just from the chocolate, but from the lack of stress that comes with taking charge of your own health. The magnesium in the chocolate helped quiet her nervous system, while the subtle boost of theobromine kept her mind sharp without the jitters. She wasn't just indulging in a treat. She was reinforcing the microscopic highways of her mind. When she came back for her 6-month checkup, the fog had lifted. She told me she had finished a 300-page novel in a weekend. For Maggie, prevention didn't taste like a bitter pill. It tasted like the rich, complex sweetness of a life reclaimed. Then there was Arthur Miller, though everyone called him Artie. He was 79 years old, a former construction foreman from the south side of Chicago, with hands that looked like they could still swing a sledgehammer. But Artie was tired. His son brought him to see me because the old man was stumbling, his balance betrayed by years of a meat and potatoes diet that had left his blood thick with homocysteine. Homocysteine is a toxic amino acid that acts like sandpaper on the inside of your arteries, creating the perfect environment for blood clots to form. Artie was a proud man who hated feeling weak, and he looked at my medical charts with deep suspicion. When I suggested he start eating lentils and beans, he let out a gruff laugh. "Doc," he said, "I built the Sears Tower. I'm not eating bird food." I had to meet Artie where he lived. In the world of facts and structural integrity, I pulled out a 2020 review from the journal Nutrients and showed him how increasing folate intake from foods like lentils could slash homocysteine levels by a staggering 25%. I told him, "Artie, think of your arteries like the plumbing in one of those buildings you built. Right now, the pipes are corroding. Folate is the sealant that stops the rust." I explained that a single cup of cooked lentils provides 18 grams of protein to keep his muscles strong and 15 grams of fiber to sweep the cholesterol out of his system. Unlike the red meat he loved, which contributed to arterial plaque and inflammation, lentils provided 730 milligrams of potassium to naturally regulate his blood pressure. Slowly, the foreman in him started to listen. He began adding black beans to his salads and asked his son to make a hearty lentil soup with plenty of garlic and olive oil. He learned to rinse the beans to avoid the bloating he feared, a simple trick that made the transition easier on his 79-year-old digestion. Within 3 months, his blood work looked like that of a man 10 years younger. The fatigue that had shadowed him for years began to dissipate. He told me he felt like he was finally repairing the foundation of his own house. Artie realized that strength isn't just about what you can lift with your arms, but about the resilience of the vessels hidden beneath your skin. He wasn't just eating beans, he was ensuring that the plumbing of his brain would hold steady for another decade of Chicago winters. In the lush, rainy city of Portland, Dorothy Vance lived alone in a house filled with books and the scent of damp earth from her garden. At 82, Dorothy was a retired librarian who prided herself on her sharp wit, but lately she felt a frightening loss of suppleness in her movements. Her blood vessels had become brittle with age, a common condition that significantly increases the risk of a catastrophic rupture or blockage. She was experiencing dizzy spells that made her afraid to walk to her mailbox. When she sat in my exam room, she looked so small, so fragile. I talked to her about avocados. I told her that this creamy fruit, often seen as an indulgence, was actually a masterclass in vascular repair. I shared with her a study from the Journal of the American Heart Association, which found that adults who ate 1 avocado per day saw a significant drop in their LDL, or bad cholesterol, while their artery function improved across the board. "Dorothy," I said, "your arteries have lost their elasticity, but the monounsaturated fats in avocados are like a lubricant for your cardiovascular system." We talked about how high cholesterol is the primary architect of the plaque that restricts blood flow to the brain, leading to the silent strokes that many seniors don't even realize they are having until the damage is done. I told her about the Harvard research showing that replacing butter or processed oils with the healthy fats found in avocados could lower stroke risk by 21%. Dorothy took my advice to heart. She started mashing a quarter of an avocado onto her whole grain toast every morning, adding a pinch of sea salt and lemon. She found she loved the creaminess, and more importantly, she loved the way it made her feel. The potassium in the avocado, even more than what you find in a banana, helped keep her heart rhythm steady, while the vitamin K and folate worked behind the scenes to keep her blood vessels strong. Gradually, the dizzy spells began to fade. She felt a new sense of flow in her body. One afternoon, she sent me a photo of her standing in her rose garden, a trowel in one hand and a bright smile on her face. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving, her brain receiving the rich oxygen it needed through arteries that were once again flexible and free. Harold Peterson, or Hank as the locals in Gloucester called him, was a man who belonged to the sea. At 71, he had spent years delivering mail through every kind of weather, but after a series of mini strokes, known as TIAs, he felt like a captain whose ship was taking on water. He was experiencing inflammation that made his joints ache and a terrifying blankness that would occasionally seize his mind for a few seconds. When I looked at his history, I realized he had drifted away from the very thing that had sustained his coastal ancestors: fatty fish. I explained to him that his brain was nearly 60% fat and it was starving for the right kind. Hank, I told him, we need to get you back on the water, figuratively speaking. We need omega-3 fatty acids. I laid out the evidence from a 2021 review in the journal Stroke that analyzed data from over 800,000 people. The findings were clear. Those who ate fatty fish like salmon, sardines, or mackerel at least twice a week had a 13% lower risk of ischemic stroke, the kind caused by clots. I explained that omega-3s work like a biological fire extinguisher for inflammation while lowering triglycerides and making the blood less sticky. Hank missed the old days but was afraid of the modern world's mercury levels. I coached him to stick to wild-caught salmon and sardines, avoiding the large predatory fish, and to stay far away from the deep fryer, which turns healthy fish into a vascular nightmare. Hank started a simple routine: grilled salmon with lemon and dill on Tuesdays and a sardine sandwich on whole grain bread on Fridays. He noticed the difference within a month. The inflammation in his body seemed to cool, and that terrifying blankness stopped happening. A study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition confirmed what Hank was feeling. Seniors who eat salmon twice a week show improved cognitive scores and better blood flow to the brain. He told me he felt like the fog over the Atlantic had finally lifted. He started walking along the docks again, watching the boats come in, no longer afraid of a sudden fall. He had refueled his brain with the very essence of the ocean, and in doing so, he had reclaimed his place on the shore.
In the vibrant, soul-filled streets of New Orleans, Eleanor Riggs had spent her life as a jazz singer, her voice a gift that could bring a room to tears. But at 85, the music was fading. Eleanor was managing type 2 diabetes, a condition that doubles or even triples the risk of stroke in seniors by damaging the small blood vessels in the brain. She told me she felt her reaction time slowing down. The notes didn't come as fast as they used to. I sat with her and talked about the power of small things. I told her about berries, blueberries, strawberries, and raspberries, and the miraculous antioxidants they contain called anthocyanins. These are the pigments that give berries their deep, rich colors, but in the human body they act as elite guards for the brain's microvasculature.
I recounted a famous study from Harvard that tracked over 93,000 women for 18 years. Those who ate berries at least 3 times a week saw a 32% drop in their stroke risk. Eleanor's eyes widened. "All that from a handful of fruit sugar?" she asked. I explained that berries help relax the arteries and protect them from the oxidative stress caused by high blood sugar. They are the ultimate brain food because they cross the blood-brain barrier to reduce inflammation directly where it matters most. I advised her to skip the sugary canned fruits and stick to fresh or frozen berries, which are just as nutritious and much more affordable. Eleanor began adding a cup of blueberries to her morning oatmeal and snacked on frozen raspberries in the Louisiana heat. She found it was the easiest change she'd ever made. Over time, her blood sugar readings became more stable, and that heavy feeling in her head began to lighten. The American Journal of Clinical Nutrition has noted that regular berry intake is associated with faster cognitive reaction times and lower blood pressure in older men and women alike. A few months later, Eleanor called me. She wasn't just talking, she was humming. She had gone back to her church choir and led a solo for the first time in years. She told me, "I thought my song was over, Sanjay, but these little berries gave me my rhythm back." She was singing again, her brain protected by a tiny, colorful army of antioxidants. As I look back over my 30,000 patients, if I were forced to choose just one category of food that acts as a miracle drug for the aging brain, it would be the leafy greens. Spinach, kale, collard greens, and Swiss chard are more than just vegetables. They are a concentrated form of vascular medicine. Yet so many of the seniors I see in my clinic barely touch them. I think of the women in a 14-year study published in the journal Stroke, over 90,000 of them, who found that those with the highest intake of leafy greens had a 20 to 30% lower risk of the most common types of stroke. This isn't a coincidence. It's chemistry. These plants are overflowing with folate, vitamin K, and dietary nitrates. I often explain to my patients that their bodies convert these nitrates into nitric oxide, the very same gas we discussed with dark chocolate, which dilates the blood vessels and ensures that every corner of the brain receives a rich supply of oxygenated blood. In clinical trials, seniors who ate just one serving of nitrate-rich spinach a day showed measurably improved arterial function in as little as 1 week. It's like clearing out a clogged highway and opening up 10 new lanes for traffic. For my patients on blood thinners like warfarin, we have to be careful and consistent with their vitamin K intake, but they don't have to miss out on the benefits. I teach them to saute their spinach with a little garlic and olive oil to make the nutrients more bioavailable, or to blend kale into a smoothie where it's masked by the sweetness of a banana.
The beauty of leafy greens is that they work quietly. They don't have the glamour of a new pharmaceutical, but they are doing the hard work of reducing inflammation and lowering homocysteine levels every single day. I've seen patients who were once lethargic and gray in their complexion regain a vibrant color and a sharpness of mind simply by making greens a non-negotiable part of their lunch and dinner. It is the foundation upon which a stroke-proof life is built. When you eat your greens, you are quite literally feeding your intelligence and shielding your future. It is the simplest, most profound choice you can make to ensure that your mind remains a sanctuary rather than a prison as the years pass.
We have journeyed through the stories of Maggie, Artie, Dorothy, Hank, and Eleanor, and in their faces, I hope you see yourself or someone you love. Their recovery wasn't built on a single heroic act, but on the quiet, daily anatomy of a choice. When we look at these 6 foods, dark chocolate, beans, avocados, fatty fish, berries, and leafy greens, we are looking at a comprehensive shield for the human brain. Each one targets a different vulnerability. Chocolate for nitric oxide, beans for homocysteine, avocados for arterial suppleness, fish for inflammation, berries for neural protection, and greens for the very foundation of vascular health. As a doctor, I can perform surgery to remove a clot, but I cannot give you back the time or the memories that a stroke steals. Only you can do that through the power of prevention. I want you to realize that you are still in charge. The 80% of strokes that are preventable represent a massive opportunity for you to claim your independence. You don't have to change your entire life in 24 hours. In fact, I often advise my patients to start with just one small win. Tomorrow morning, put some berries in your cereal. Next week, try a lentil soup instead of a burger. These choices are signals sent to every blood vessel in your body that you are still fighting, that you still want more mornings and more strength in every step. Over time, these small choices aggregate into a powerful defense system. They become the quiet guardians of your ability to speak, to walk, and to remember. I've seen 30,000 patients, and the ones who thrive in their 70s, 80s, and 90s are almost always the ones who understood that health is a relationship, not a destination. You must nourish your body if you expect it to protect you. The science is settled. The kitchen pharmacy is open. You have the blueprints, the research from Harvard and the world's leading clinics, and the real-life examples of those who have turned their health around. The question is no longer what can be done, but what will you do today? You have the power to protect the masterpiece that is your mind. Don't let the silent thief take what you have spent a lifetime building. Build your shield, one meal at a time.
As our time together comes to an end, I want to leave you with a thought that I share with my own family. My life's work in neurosurgery has been a privilege, but my true passion is helping you avoid ever needing to see a surgeon like me. We have talked about the 6 pillars of a stroke preventive diet, but the most important ingredient is your own resolve. To summarize what we have learned, aim for 2 squares of dark chocolate, 70% or higher, to relax your vessels. Embrace beans and lentils 3 times a week to slash toxic homocysteine. Enjoy half an avocado daily to keep your arteries supple. Eat fatty fish like salmon or sardines twice a week to extinguish inflammation. Feed your brain a cup of berries daily to guard your neurons. And make leafy greens a non-negotiable daily habit to ensure oxygen reaches every cell. These are not just suggestions, they are your roadmap to a legacy of health. My advice is to act immediately. Don't wait for a warning sign like a dizzy spell or a momentary lapse in speech, because often the first sign of a stroke is the event itself. Go to your kitchen right now, look at what is in your pantry. Make a list for your next trip to the grocery store that includes these 6 life-saving foods. This is the most important investment you will ever make, with a return that is measured in years of laughter, mobility, and cognitive clarity. You have the knowledge. Now you must marry it to action.
I've spent 50 years on this earth and 25 in the most intense medical environments imaginable, and I can tell you that nothing is more precious than your independence. If this message has touched you, if the stories of Maggie, Artie, and the others have given you hope, I ask you to do two things. First, share this with someone you care about, a spouse, a parent, a friend, someone who needs to know that 80% of their fear can be erased with the right choices. Second, if you want to continue this journey of healing and discovery with me, please consider subscribing to this channel. My goal is to bring you the best of medical science wrapped in the warmth of human experience, so we can all age with grace and strength. Thank you for trusting me with your time and your health. Take care of your body, and I promise you it will take care of the life you love. I'm Dr. Sanjay Gupta, and I look forward to seeing you in our next conversation. Be well.